Now, so many Department of Justice lawyers and their staff are quitting that the ones who are left standing are now being held in contempt because they're unable to keep up with the paperwork. At least one DOJ lawyer in humiliating fashion has been held in contempt in a very serious way. And this DOJ lawyer has blamed just their inability to keep up with the paperwork because so many DOJ lawyers have quit. And what's fascinating about this federal contempt order by this judge is we've seen so many judges threaten these DOJ lawyers with contempt, and now it feels that the dam has opened, the floodgates have opened, and now we're going to see lots of these lawyers who are left standing now have these contempt rulings against them, which also will impact their future ability to get jobs and to progress in their career in a post-Trump regime world. I mean, by all accounts, this guy, Matthew Ishiara, who is this lawyer who used to be a JAG lawyer, military lawyer. Remember how we were covering here, how these JAG lawyers were now becoming AUSAs, Assistant United States Attorneys, because all the AUSAs who are like your line prosecutors, these are like your workhorses at the DOJ, they were all either quitting or being forced out or being fired. So these JAG lawyers having good careers, they're doing their thing. They went to specialized training in schools where they learned about JAG related stuff. And now they're being all of a sudden thrown into the job as being AUSAs, being federal prosecutors, different rules, different laws, an entirely different structure, right? The federal rules of criminal procedure versus the military code of procedure. Very different how these things are litigated and what the rules are. And so now this guy, Ishiara, he gets moved over. He thinks he's trying to do his best. All of a sudden, he's getting flooded with paperwork, specifically these habeas petitions from migrants who are saying we haven't gotten due process and we need to be released because there hasn't been any bond hearings and there hasn't been any or habeas corpus petitions have been granted. And now the paperwork needs to be completed to release us from these facilities like Dilley and other ones that are in Texas where they're really horrible conditions. And the lawyer literally can't keep up with the paperwork. It's not, and the lawyer's even saying, I'm sorry, it fell through the cracks. I'm not being malicious. The lawyer apologized. It's just we're understaffed and I missed the deadlines and I'm sorry. But you missing the deadline, Ishiara, when your job is to, at the bare minimum, meet the deadline. And then once you meet the deadlines to actually do the work, it's causing people to be unlawfully detained and suffer and be tortured when they're supposed to be free. So it's not just a mere missed deadline in, say, I don't know, some case that involves some issue that's, meaningless. These are people's lives at stake. So you have this federal judge in Texas, and this district court judge is named Laura Provenzino, and she made this finding that this government attorney, Michael Ishiara, used to be a JAG lawyer. Now he got moved to be a federal prosecutor, was found in civil contempt for violating her orders in a habeas corpus case. The attorney who got these contempt sanctions is Matthew Ishiara, a JAG attorney from the Department of Defense, assisting the local U.S. Attorney Office. And Provenzino ordered a detained immigrant who was held by ICE in El Paso to be released in Minnesota with all of his identification papers. ICE then released the man with none of his papers, forcing his attorneys to find him a shelter for the night and a flight back to Minnesota because these people are being picked off the street in Minnesota, shipped to another location, and then once the habeas corpus petition was granted, they just threw the guy out in the middle of the night into the street with no IDs, no money, no wallet, no anything. And the guy was like, where do I go? Where do I go? And so the lawyer brought this up to the judge and they said, Judge, this is why we specifically attach to the orders these requirements. And the lawyers at the DOJ are not following through with what your orders are. The judge said she's imposing a civil contempt order to force the government to comply. Government attorney Matthew Ishiara is personally responsible for $500 daily fines every day the man does not have his papers, starting immediately. Ishiara issued an apology for allowing the order in the habeas case to fall through the cracks. He blamed the situation on case overload and significant understaffing in the U.S. Attorney's Office. He says that since he was moved from being a military lawyer to a federal prosecutor, he picked up nearly 130 habeas cases in just the last month. So 130 cases with 130 different paperwork was thrown on his desk, and he can't keep up with the paperwork. Well, that's what your job is. And how did it come to this? Let's bring in Harry Littman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds podcast, and Talking Feds Substack. Harry, when you and I have been covering all of these DOJ lawyers and staff quitting, 8,000 quitting or being fired, and now JAG lawyers being moved in, this is a consequence of understaffing. But people like Ishiara doesn't seem, from all of the accounts I've read, as a bad guy with malicious intent the way Bondi and Blanche are. But now this is how people know him when he gets Googled. Ishiara, he's the guy who said, I can't handle the paperwork. If I was running the law firm back in the day, I wouldn't hire this guy. If I run a law firm in the future, I wouldn't hire Ishiara. You've worked at law firms at all levels. You wouldn't hire an Ishiara after looking at this guy's background. This is not that Ishiara, to me, I care more about the migrant who was tortured than Ishiara, but also we should reflect on how this DOJ chaos is now trickling down and ruining careers.
100%, and I agree. Well, I'll say I agree, but first of all, this is everything you laid out, Ben. This is really structural at this point. You have first a flood of habeas cases, and nobody is really prepared for them, along with a mass exodus of regular professionals. So new people coming in and, not even knowing which way the water fountain is, and they've got to deal with this. You also have, this is the very issue. We talked about this in Minnesota, where the chief judge says, you violated more orders, ICE, in a month, last month, than most agencies do in their entire lifetimes. It's this very one